time has come now for us to present this year's winner of the Young Activist Award, which we present each year in Mario's name. And the award now, in addition to the honor, consists of a $4,000 prize, which is divided equally between the recipient and his or her organization. And hopefully in future years, we will be increasing the amount of that award. So y'all contribute, please. This year's winner of the Mario Savio Young Activist Award, 27-year-old Jason West, began his activist career at the tender age of 6, when, after learning that styrofoam was not biodegradable and was bad for the environment, he led his family in a boycott of McDonald's. Unfortunately, the boycott collapsed in short order as his 4-year-old sister wore down his resolve by constantly asking for Happy Meals. Jason has only hazy memories of this start to his career, but his mother assures him that it is true. At age 12, having learned that garbage in landfills doesn't break down because it isn't exposed to sunlight, Jason conceived the idea of solving the world's garbage crisis by building a series of huge concrete bunkers filled with trays of garbage and UV lights to mimic the sun and break the garbage down to dust. He cried bitterly when the telephone receptionist at the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation dismissed him brusquely, refusing to take his claims to have solved the garbage crisis seriously. Jason's education in the frustrations of political and social activism continued during his service as secretary of his high school environmental club, when, as he describes it, he came face to face with the staggering cruelty and masochistic nature of endless, unfocused, pointless meetings. Undeterred, Jason spent his college years attending protests on environmental issues, against tuition hikes and cuts in financial aid. You know, the more things change, the more things stay the same, as they say. Against the death penalty, and so forth, as well as doing childcare at a refuge for battered women. He also served as coordinator of the Fair Trial for Mumia Coalition and helped organize hundreds of people to attend the Millions for Mumia demonstration in Philadelphia. In 1999, Jason interned with the AFL-CIO's Union Summer Program, working in a twin struggle to keep a poor neighborhood hospital open and win a new union contract for the nurses. After learning the basics of community and union organizing, he went on to be a co-founder of the Mid-Hudson Direct Action Network. That's New York State, for those of you who are Westerners. And helped organize the week of demonstrations in Washington against the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, getting arrested in the process. That year, Jason also began his political career, running for the New York State Assembly in his district as the Green Party candidate. His campaign focused on universal health care, a living wage, environmental protection, and support for the unionizing efforts of local direct care workers. Although he received only 3% of the vote, his campaign forced his Democratic opponent to find $500,000 to settle a contract dispute between a group of these workers and their employer. Jason then joined a political mask and puppet theater company, performing theater pieces about the ecology of the Hudson River Valley and the planet as a whole in countless schools and other venues. In 2002, he ran again for state assembly on the Green Party ticket, losing once more, but receiving praise from local media for his articulate proposals on complicated issues such as health care and taxes. After a 6-month recuperation from burnout, characterized by renting many videos and getting reacquainted with the local bars, Jason hit the campaign trail again, running for mayor of New Paltz, along with 2 colleagues who ran for seats on the village board. All 3 won, sweeping the elections and gaining international press as the first Green Party majority in New York history. As mayor, Jason returned to his first political passion, garbage. Having campaigned on a platform of bringing renewable energy practices to village government, Jason fulfilled one of his major promises by getting an artificial reed bed created to filter sludge organically instead of shipping it out of town. This radically lessens the financial and environmental costs of waste treatment. He also came to international attention when he became only the 2nd elected official in America to marry same-sex couples, and the first to be criminally prosecuted for doing so. Capitalizing on his newfound fame, Jason fulfilled a long-term dream by founding the Generation Project, an institute to train activists to become better organizers through in-house programs and networking with other activist training organizations. For his dedication and commitment to working for the health of the environment and for human rights, and in particular, for his persistence and success in using electoral campaigns to communicate important ideas to an electorate accustomed to meaningless slogans and personality politics, we are pleased to award this year's Mario Savio Young Activist Award to Jason West.
Thank you very much, both to the fund and to all of y'all for coming out tonight. I've been told I only have 5 minutes because y'all are here to see Molly, and so am I, and I hear myself speak enough, so I'll get right to the point. There's a Frederick Douglass quote that we see often on bumper stickers and t-shirts that says, "Power concedes nothing without a demand." Well, I think he's wrong. Or at least the bumper sticker manufacturers are wrong because they don't finish the statement. My question is, what happens when our demands aren't met? Today in America, and for generations, activists have been content to do nothing but make demands. But we have to come to the cold, hard reality that our demands are being effectively ignored. There was a world record set last February when millions of people all over the world demonstrated against the war in Iraq. I marched with 500,000 people in New York City alone. I'm sure you did the same in San Francisco and the Bay Area. But we were ignored. And it's easy to blame the idiot monkey in the White House for all the world's troubles. But we also have to remember that while the Republican Party led us to war, the Democrats followed close behind, giving Bush 18 standing ovations. Now, I've never been a Democrat, I've never been a Republican. I wasn't engaged in politics before I joined the Green Party. And I'm glad I did, and I'm fairly sure there's 400 newly married couples in our village who share that sentiment. But the trouble is, I knew what the trouble was a second ago and I lost my place. I remember now. The trouble is, too many activists in this country are content to protest. And as far as I'm concerned, protest is just a larger form of lobbying. Because every protest you go to, you have to remember who your target is. When you go to an anti-war protest, who is it you're trying to persuade? Who has the power to give you what you want? And the answer to that question is often an elected official. So why is it we're content to make demands? Why is it we're content to protest and lobby to persuade other people to use their power in a way they don't want to, instead of taking that power for ourselves? And that's what I'm here to ask you all to do. It's easy, trust me. Get 6 of your friends in a room together, look at how many votes you need to win a city council election, and go out and persuade 1,000 people that you're right. You do this often enough, and eventually you will win. Or you'll lose and get burnt out and bitter and start complaining about the uselessness of electoral politics. The trouble, for me at least, and I hope the trouble for many of you in this room tonight, is that for years I felt I could not engage in electoral politics without compromising my principles. I couldn't stomach the thought of being a Democrat or a Republican and joining an organization that is doing everything in its power to kill the world I live on. Now here in the Bay Area, you all are leading the way. You've shown us a way out of that trap, out of the good cop, bad cop, Democrat and Republican game. In San Francisco, I was just reading in The Guardian that you have instant runoff voting in elections in San Francisco now. That's brilliant. And I'm so thankful to be in a room where I don't have to explain what that means to somebody. Now, I'm not, this is a choir. I like preaching to the choir. You got to preach to the choir or else the choir gets depressed. But I'm not here to tell you what to do, because this is your community. You have to make that decision for yourselves. But if you don't like the way your elected officials are behaving, if your Congress members, the members of the state legislature or city council are not acting the way you would act if you were holding that office, one, it's a waste of time for you to vote for them. Because why bother voting if you're going to get what you don't want? But if there's not a candidate worth voting for, every single person in this room has a moral obligation to run for office against those people. Everybody. And if you don't have instant runoff voting in your community, you got to get it. And the way to get that is to run for office. Simple circular logic is great, isn't it? Because it is only when the Democrats or Republicans are threatened with a loss of their power that they will institute reforms like instant runoff voting. And if you're a progressive, and this is a very unpopular thing to say as a Green in this time in America, if you are a progressive, especially in a local race, the most effective way to challenge a Democrat is to say to that Democrat, on the one hand, here's instant runoff voting. I need you to pass this in the city council. When they say no, you say, all right, well, I don't like what you're doing, so I'm going to spoil every single election you run in until you give me what I want. It's as simple as that. And that's what we're doing in our community. So I think I'll end on that, only because I think it's a fitting tribute to the man whose picture shares the stage here to end a political speech with an unpopular statement. Thank you very much.
Well, good evening. I'm Orville Schell, Dean of the Graduate School of Journalism. Thank you. one of the main reasons we're here tonight is because of one man who actually has taken Jason's good counsel and done something, and that's Steve Silberstein. Steve, you've meant a lot to this campus, to many of us, certainly to this event, to the Free Speech Movement Cafe, the library. I can't see you, but others may be able to. Will you stand up? Thanks, Steve. Now listen, if our guest needed an introduction, you wouldn't be here. So I'm not going to really give one. Our visiting speaker tonight, her very good friend, former Texas Governor Ann Richards, used to say that of that species of Texas woman whose bouffant hairdo had that cotton candy look, the higher the hair, the closer to God. And I think on the totem pole of our own sort of mortal reigning pantheon of venerable spirits, our guest ranks very high indeed. So join me in welcoming this nation's foremost bushwhacker, Molly Ivins.
All right. I want to tell y'all, I feel like Jason. It's so nice to be with a crowd where I don't have to explain the jokes. Gosh, it is good to be back in Berkeley. It is an honor to be here to give the lecture in an arrangement created in the name of Mario Savio. What a thrill for me. Now, I have thought about it, and it's always hard when I haven't been here for a while for me to remember what Berkeley is like. And usually what I do is go around saying to discouraged liberals in various places like Fritters, Alabama, that they need to cheer up. And it occurs to me that maybe you all don't need that as much. But then I thought about your governor and realized that indeed you could use some cheering. And sorry about making the obvious point. One reason you should feel better right away is because you don't have to be in Texas. Our governor is a guy named Good Hair Perry. That man has a head of hair every Texan can be proud of, regardless of party. And a couple of summers ago, Good Hair needed to appoint a new member of the Public Utilities Commission. As y'all remember here and know very well here in California, that can turn out to be a critical public body. So Good Hair selected for this purpose a former Enron executive. The next day, Good Hair got a $25,000 check from Ken Lay. Those with suspicious minds thought there might be a connection. Good Hair was forced to hold a press conference where he explained to everybody's total satisfaction that it was completely coincidental. Now, in Texas, we do not have a sunshine law. We have sort of a partly cloudy law. But even in Texas, if you get a major state appointment like that, you have to fill out a bunch of forms, and all your finances and all this becomes part of the public record. So the Enron executive's forms showed up a couple of days later. Some minion from the governor's office brought them around to the press room where the alert guardian watchdogs of democracy were in action. And Well, I started looking at the form, and somebody says, I don't know, you think 17 looks funny? Gee, I don't know, Sam, you think 17 looks funny? We all thought 17 looked funny. That was the question you have to answer about whether or not you've ever had any unfortunate involvement with law enforcement authorities. The governor's office had whited out the answers to question 17. This was a very sophisticated cover-up. We in the press corps are hard to fool. We were on the trail and discovered in no time flat that the citizen had had a couple of minor brushes with minor traffic violations, and also while out hunting the year before he had accidentally shot a whooping crane. And then he accidentally buried the whooping crane. I'm not making this up. And as a result, I had to pay a $15,000 fine under what in Texas is known as the endangered species law. And we all thought that was damn stiff. And we put all this in the newspapers, and of course Texas is full of hunters. And their reaction was, well, hell, anybody could accidentally hit a whooper. But we stayed on the story, and the next day we were able to report that he hit the whooper while on a duck hunt. Now, we got a whole state full of hunters. Now, you know, the whooping crane is 5 feet tall. It's a very large bird. The duck... Now we got a whole state full of hunters saying, you know, if this son of a bitch too dumb to tell a whooper from a duck, he shouldn't be running state utilities. Forced to resign. My friends, progress can be made in many different and wonderful ways. Now, the great excitement at home, of course, is we've just had some political indictments, and 3 of the top fundraisers for Tom DeLay were all indicted. But they were indicted for breaking Texas campaign finance laws. You have to understand the magnitude of that achievement. We don't have any campaign finance laws in Texas. I mean, you really have to work at it to get indicted for that. And so we're all real proud of them. And we think this case may eventually lead to other indictments. And among those prominently mentioned in the indictable category is the incumbent Speaker of the Texas House of Representatives, a fellow named Tom Craddick. Now, I don't have anything against Tom Craddick personally. I don't like his politics, but I don't wish him ill. However, I am rooting for his indictment just as a matter of Texas political tradition. Should Craddick be indicted, that would make 6 out of the last 7 House speakers indicted for one thing or another. Now, there was one in that 6, I have to admit, who kind of broke the string. He was not indicted. He was the one who was shot to death by his wife. She was indicted but not convicted, because in Texas we recognize public service when we see it. Now, here we are in the year of our Lord, 2004, faced with a really exciting presidential campaign. And I know that the stunning charisma of both candidates just has people agog. Bush was in the Midwest 2 months ago, and he had a private meeting with leaders of the Amish community there, and he told the Amish that God speaks through him. I myself thought the Lord knew how to pronounce nuclear, so I was a little surprised. But as I watched that first debate with John Kerry, it became clear to me that that was not God speaking. He's much more articulate. And what we had was another case of a Lord impersonator. This happens all the time in Texas. People are always thinking that God told them to do something. And a couple of years ago, a bunch of people in Level Land said that God told them to take off their clothes, get in a GTO, and drive to Louisiana, which they did. 17 naked people in a GTO. got to Vinton, Louisiana, and ran into a tree. The Vinton cops said that seeing 17 naked people pile out of one car was really amazing. That was not God that told those people to do it. It's that fellow who runs around impersonating the Lord, and that's clearly who Bush has been listening to. Now, I trust we're all feeling a little better after that debate. But I know people on the left. First of all, you were all depressed because our candidate was such a dog. And then everybody's mumbling and grumbling and saying, oh God, we're never going to win this thing. And then, of course, after the debate, when the Lord impersonator failed to come through for Bush, there was a dizzy moment of joy, and you were all buoyed up, and now, of course, you're biting your nails again. I know you people. What we need to do here is just a classic thing. There comes a time in every political race where you just settle down and go to the stretch and just work your asses off. Now, I know that living in Berkeley is almost the same problem the president has. It's a bit of a bubble in its way. But I want to suggest to you all that people you need to work on are not far away. I was in California very recently and spoke to the Sacramento Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce. I was speaking that day. They were having a day-long presentation. The other speakers were Rudy Giuliani, J.C. Watts, and Bill O'Reilly. Those folks need to hear from y'all. I think it is, in many ways, an ugly political season. It is getting harder and harder to have civil political conversations outside Berkeley. You know, people get all red in the face and the tendons start to stand out in their necks and their wattles commence to shake like a turkey gobbler. I mean, it's just scary. And of course, I'm living in a state where if you say you're not going to vote for Bush, people assume that it means you're unpatriotic and don't believe in God. And it's kind of hard to carry on a conversation after that, actually. But just a bit more of a challenge than usual. It is true that many people are possessed of an unusual sense of self-righteousness. Many of them in the red states, of course, believe that God is speaking to them. That Lord impersonator, we've got to do something about it. I think that what happens is that unless you're in a place like Berkeley, and that's the freedom of speech question the chancellor asked, what is happening is that the pressure of conformity is lying heavier and heavier. Now, this always happens when there's a war on. We always get a certain amount of patriotic bullying. The people who support the war, you get that kind of Merle Haggard, Okie from Muskogee mentality. And they think that we're all godless communists. You know, during World War I, people like that went around kicking dachshunds on the grounds that they were German dogs. I'll tell y'all something about people like that. They don't kick German shepherds. And of course, as a good liberal myself, I realize there are many radicals here. I have, of course, the milk of human kindness beats in pours from every vein, and my heart bleeds for everybody from the milk-shy Hottentot to the glandular obese. Nevertheless, I would point out to y'all that one of the things that has happened is that red state liberals are really pissed off. And it is the kind of year when my fellow Texans, when informed that voting for Kerry is unpatriotic and godless, turn around and say, I not only resent that, I resent the hell out of that. And so political conversations are getting more interesting. Now, I always love the one where liberals propose that they go out and educate voters who don't agree with them. You know, many of those people actually consider themselves well educated. Maybe what we need to think about is trying to convince them or persuade them. Now, I do believe that there is a bumper sticker worth mentioning this year. If you are not completely appalled, you haven't been paying attention. And so it may seem difficult to talk to Bush voters, but we know that they lurk in these very California woods. We've seen evidence of it. Governor, your governor, the man who, to use Clive James' line, looks like a condom stuffed with walnuts. Your governor is, of course, evidence of Republican presence in the state. So I don't feel there's any shortage of people for you all to go out and be evangelical toward. I mean, it's not that just step across the city line of Berkeley and there you are. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk to you all about is the people who don't care at all. Elections in this country are decided by the people who don't vote. And it is always amazing to me to hear the three great mantras of the non-voters. Well, there's nothing I can do about it. They're all crooks. I'm sorry, I'm just not interested in politics. Look, politics, that man, Mario Savio, had in his passion, in his absolutely exciting, thrilling way of making people see that politics is not a picture on a wall. It is not a television program that you can decide whether or not you like. You can't stand back from it. It is the warp and woof of our lives. And of course, every day, in dozens, even hundreds of ways, our lives are touched by the decisions made by people with political power and their masters, those with money. I think that the system is deeply corrupted by money. I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that. I'm not going to just sit around and say, oh, we live in a democracy, isn't it wonderful? No, it's deeply corrupt. But being optimistic to the point of idiocy, I think that can actually be changed. I think public campaign financing is the best way to do that. And of course, you will run across people who will tell you, well, no matter what you do, the money is going to find a way to get around whatever system you have. Well, yeah, it probably will. And then we'll just have to fix it again, won't we? I'm a great believer in perpetual reform. I do think, though, that when the people of this country speak up very strongly, the people in power still pay attention. The wonderful thing about politicians is that they're real goosey. That's a term of art. If you say boo to them, they go, and whenever they imagine they hear the voice of the people, which they think they're listening for all the time, sometimes I think we just need to speak up a little more. They'll pay attention. It's true we couldn't stop the war. And it's true that one of the most annoying things you can say, one of the least effective things you can say is, I told you so. But I know, as you do, that there's an extent to which, churlishly, we are sort of sitting around saying that. What I wanted to preach to you a little bit about, okay, I'm gonna watch my time here, just like those guys in the debates, is what I think is a real problem for the left in this country. And I am just as serious as a stroke about this. You people need to work harder at having fun. You do not have enough fun. You are fun challenged. And The reason you got to have fun is because, as that great philosopher Jimmy Buffett says, if we couldn't laugh, we would all go insane. And the reason you have to look for ways to make politics fun is not only that it's your life, but also because it's a better way to live, it's better for your health, and it will keep you from becoming disgusted, cynical, bitter, and burned out. There is no use at all in thinking, well, we'll have fun after we win. Wrong approach. As a Texas liberal, I would like to explain to y'all, not a good plan. Now, in Texas, where we are pretty darn good at this, we like to think, I think the key ingredients, I thought about this a fair amount, are imagination and beer. Recommend it, or whatever California variant you might prefer. That is a story I know I've told before, but I think I've got a new audience, mostly new audience. Isn't that wonderful? John Henry Falk always said, you don't need new stories, you just need a new audience. Was a few years back, the Texas legislature took a fit of communism and decided to make Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday a state holiday. Now, don't worry, it was a package deal. We kept Confederate Heroes Day. Nevertheless, the legislature recognizing Dr. King's birthday, it naturally upset the Ku Klux Klan. And they announced they were coming to Austin to have a big protest and rally at the Capitol. And, you know, it's always discouraging when the Klan comes to visit. The black citizens get upset, the Jewish citizens get upset, the skinhead kids turn out to cheer for them. Everybody's mad at everybody for 6 months. Fist fights on the sidewalk, just awful. And of course, as a civil libertarian, there you are, standing up for the right of these blue-bellied nincompoops to spew whatever vicious drivel they want to, because it's in the goddamn First Amendment. It's free speech. And that is a stand that will make you about as popular as a whore trying to get into the SMU School of Theology. You are not going to make a bunch of friends sticking up for the Klan's right to free speech, let me tell you. Did Mario Savio ever had to deal with this kind of thing, I ask you? Well, we have to deal with it a fair amount, and so we fall back on our resources, and we fell mournfully gathered over a pitcher of beer and came up with a better plan. Now, we don't have enough cluckers in Austin to have a good march. They had to be bussed in from Waco and Vidor. Got off the buses wearing their little pointy hats on their little pointy heads and started marching up Congress Avenue toward the state capitol. They were greeted by several thousand citizens of Austin who mooned them as they marched. Made a real nice effect. It was kind of like a wave in a baseball stadium. Now, I'm not sure I need to encourage the left at Berkeley to be more eccentric than you already are. I saw the naked man when I taught here. But I do think that having a good time while you're doing this is critical to A, getting it done, and B, staying sane. The guy who taught me how to do that was the late John Henry Falk. And I'll tell you what it was like to go freedom fighting with Johnny. I get a call on a hot summer day. That's redundant. From the director of the Central Texas chapter of the American Civil Liberties Union, who informed me in a state of high excitement that the Austin City Plan Commission was about to destroy the First Amendment. I said, damn. The First Amendment is under fairly steady fire in the great state, but I had not previously counted the City Plan Commission among the forces of jackbooted fascism. Well, the situation is this. In Austin, Texas, we have a fundamentalist divine, the Reverend Mark Weaver by name. Reverend Weaver heads up a group called Citizens Against Pornography. He is determined to drive sin out of Austin, Texas. I believe he has his life's work cut out for him. Well, the citizens against marched around outside the dirty bookstores and movie theaters of our town with signs saying, "Honk if you hate pornography." Well, I always honk. I hate pornography, and I think they lend a certain je ne sais quoi to our municipal life. Weaver and his friends had come up with a proposed new zoning ordinance under the provisions of which you could not have a home or a school or a church within so many feet, the porn stuff. And the upshot, of course, would be to drive all the dirty bookstores and movie theaters out of Austin, to the cultural deprivation of the citizenry. Now, as much as I disliked pornography, I did not think it was a good idea to have Reverend Weaver deciding what books we could read and what movies we could see. And so I reported for duty that night in the meeting of the City Plan Commission. There were 350 citizens against pornography and 4 of us from the Civil Liberties Union. I am here to tell you that there is nothing like sitting in the midst of a sea of citizens against pornography to make you notice that your friends look like perverts. Weaver got up to speak first, very fine preacher of that old-fashioned style. He said how that very day, he'd gotten a telephone call from a lady who lives behind the dirty movie theater on South Congress Avenue. I snapped to attention. It's my neighborhood dirty movie theater. Driving to the meeting, I noticed they had a new feature attraction, the Nun's Bad Habit. Yes, said Weaver, the lady who lives right behind that theater. That lady, after the 5 o'clock show on a previous day, a man came out of that theater and went in the alley behind that theater, which is right but directly behind that lady's house, and the man there masturbated. 350 people went simultaneously. And yes, said Weaver, that lady has 2 little girls. Might have seen that man do that terrible thing, except, praise Jesus, she has a large fence around her backyard. Whereupon we all praised Jesus. And Weaver was off and running. He was cussing sin up one side and down the other. By the time he got through, it looked bad for the First Amendment. We huddled and sent up Johnny Falk, our oldest living member, shuffled up the mic doing his well-known impersonation of an enfeebled senior citizen. Johnny was always very courtly. He began by saying, "Members of the City Plan Commission, Reverend Weaver, cities against, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Henry Falk. I am 76 years old. I was born and raised in South Austin, Texas, not a quarter of a mile from where the dirty movie theater stands today on Congress. I think you should all know that there was a great deal of masturbation in South Austin before there was ever a dirty movie theater." John Henry was one of the heroes of a bad time in this country, the McCarthy era. And that's when he took up freedom fighting as a serious thing. Not many people know this, but before he went into being a First Amendment defender, Johnny was in law enforcement. In fact, he was in the Texas Rangers, captain. He was 6 at the time. His friend Boots Cooper, who was 7, was the sheriff. And they used to do a lot of serious law enforcement out behind the Falk family place. One day, Johnny's mama, having 2 such fine lawmen right there on the property, said to them, "Boys, I want y'all to go down the hen house. Get that chicken snake out of the hen house." Johnny and Boots were all excited about this big assignment. They galloped down there on their brooms. They tethered their brooms. Went into the hen house. Went through all the nests on the bottom shelf. No snake. They were of an age and of a size where to see up on the second shelf they had to stand on tiptoes, see if there's a snake there. And there was. Now, I have never myself been nose to nose with a chicken snake, but I always took Johnny's word for it that it would just scare the living shit out of you. And it scared Johnny and Boots so bad they both tried to get out of the hen house at the same time, doing considerable damage to themselves and the hen house door in the process. They came trailing back up the porch all shamefaced. Miss Falk looked at him and said, boys, what is wrong with you? You know perfectly well that a chicken steak will not hurt you." And that's when Boots Cooper said this semi-immortal thing. He said, yes, ma'am, but some things will scare you so bad you'll hurt yourself. Now, don't you know that's what we do again and again in this country? Get so scared of a real menace, not a chicken steak. Scared of communism, scared of crime, scared of drugs, scared of illegal aliens, scared of terrorists. So scared that we hurt ourselves, make the same mistake over and over again. We think we can make ourselves safer by making ourselves less free. I tell you something, when you make yourself less free, all that happens afterward is that you are less free, you are not safer. So here we are in a time again when we're living through this, we're watching it happen. Some of you have been around for a while and have seen it before. The difference now, I think, is that the media are differently configured and have different traditions. There is an artificial echo chamber on the right end of mass media in this country, created not by any vast right-wing conspiracy, nothing hidden about it. It's been out in the open there for anybody to see for many years. It goes back at least 30 years to the Republicans who met in the wake of the disaster of 1964 for them when Barry Goldwater lost overwhelmingly to Lyndon Johnson. And the people who had money on the right decided to pool it. The usual suspects, Richard Mellon's Cave, Coors Brothers, Bradley Foundation, Olin Foundation. You'll find the same names over and over and over. And what they did was decided that the right wing needed to have more voice in the political debate. And they paid for the Heritage Institute, which was the beginning, the grandfather. There are now literally hundreds of these right-wing think tanks all over the country. And in order to get the skewed sociology and research published in these places, done in these places, published, they have subsidized publications, subsidized journals, and the small magazines, small political magazines. National Review used to stand alone. Now there's a Weekly Standard and others. The subsidized right-wing media, Washington Times and so forth, picks it up and then breaks into mainstream political debate. And the result is that our entire political debate has been dramatically shifted to the right. Because these people have an unnatural amplifier. That brings up an old grudge of mine, and watching the clips from '64, I want to tell you that early on when people were ginning up to protest this new war in Iraq, I happened to be out here for something, and I took a sort of busman's holiday and went on that first big peace march in San Francisco. And of course it was wonderful and I enjoyed it, and was really struck by the age range, which seemed to me much greater than it was in the Vietnam era. And I was really having a wonderful time until, of course, we got to the place where we were going to have the rally. God damn it, can't the left ever get a speaker system that works? I mean, come on. After all these years, Mario Savio could have been world famous if he just had a better amp system. I do think that many of us who remember old times are having horrible flashbacks. The similarities are eerie and uncanny, and can also be overdone. But if you remember, it took a real long time for us to wake up to the war in Vietnam. Really took the country a long time. That war went on for 10 years. And I think that we were not, many of us not so noble. We were draftable is what the problem was. Not that I recommend that, but I am pleased with how many Americans are paying attention. I never root for bad things to happen to anybody, and I sure as hell don't root for bad things to happen to American soldiers. We lost enough in Vietnam to make me sick of that. But the fact is that Iraq is a disaster. And the fact that at least half of us have noticed this early is something, I think, to be taken as encouragement. I don't want it to get worse, but I do think that the spin we are getting from the White House, that everything is just lovely and we are going to create a beacon of democracy in that poor, benighted part of the world, is such happy horse shit. That I can hardly stand to listen to it, and I've spent years listening to members of the Texas legislature. I have the political equivalent of a cast iron stomach, and even I can't take it. Now, I want to do y'all's questions, so I'm going to close with, of course, another story. Some of y'all may remember the late Joe Rao. A great freedom-fighting lawyer. He was active in the McCarthy era in the early days of the civil rights movements when it was not clear to anyone that we were going to win there. You know, he'd come down, bail various people out of various jails, always showing up late at night in some godforsaken neck of the woods. So, a few years back, just before he died, Joe was going to get one of those Lifetime Freedom Fighter Awards. Jason stays with it long enough, he'll get one of those too. And he was real sick in hospital. He asked a friend to go down to Philadelphia to collect this award for him. His friend came to see him in the hospital, said, "Joe, what do you want me to tell these folks when I pick up the award?" And Joe's lying there thinking about it. His friend is thinking about it too. And I was sort of looking at Joe thinking, you know, this guy could have been anything in the legal world. He could have been with the top New York law firms. He could have had a distinguished career on the bench. He could have really, this is a brilliant mind. He could have gone so far in professional terms, and here he's just, you know, freedom-fighting lawyer, not for the end of his life. And Joe looked up and said to his friend, "I want you to tell him how much fun it was. How much fun it was." Now listen, y'all, that's my aim. I'm getting on down toward the end of my road. Some of you all are too. We want to be able to turn around and say to young people like Jason, we want to tell them how much fun we had. Thank you.